In today's video, I thought it would be enjoyable and interesting to try out together the legendary CX3 Tonewheel Hammond organ that's built in to this KORG Nautilus and also the KORG KRONOS. Hello and welcome to Piano Shack with me, Woody. Thank you for tuning in. Recently, I've really been enjoying the sound of the Hammond B3 and playing the clones here. I've got the Yamaha YC. Today, we're taking a look at the Nautilus, which has the CX3 virtual physical Hammond organ model built in. Really nice model of a Hammond organ. It sounds great. I'm going to play you some of the presets today. I'll also explain a little bit how you can edit and tweak the sound to get it to your liking. Let's start off with this preset, which we have here called Jimmy's Organ. I'll play a little bit for you now. So if you ever see a preset with the name Jimmy under the organ category of a keyboard, then they are referring to Jimmy Smith, the great iconic jazz organ player who transformed the Hammond organ into something that sounded really hip and cool. So here's a rough approximation of one of his tunes. Today then, we are exploring one of the 9 sound engines on the Nautilus. I've already done the piano and the electric piano. Today we are focusing on the CX3, which is an emulation of the Hammond organ and the Leslie Rotary speaker. I'll take you through some of the presets so you can hear some of the variation of the tones that you can dial up. We'll also talk a little bit how you can tweak some of these. Let's move on a little bit to the next sound that I'll demonstrate for you. Okay, I found this one, which I like. It's a bit more of a bluesy, distorted, overdriven sound. This one's called Bro J, either referring again to Jimmy, or maybe Jack McDuff or Jimmy McGriff, famous jazz organ players. Let's take a listen. So the CX3 is a very well-known and highly regarded Hammond organ clone wheel. I say the word clone wheel. That's a bit of a play on words. It's referring to the fact that the Hammond organ, the real one, had spinning tone wheels. The digital emulations we called clone wheels. So the CX3, the digital version, was released by KORG in about 2001. So it's quite long in the tooth now. And that same physical modeling technology is here on the Nautilus and on the KRONOS. It sounds really, really nice, and it's actually derived from an analog CX3. Prior to the digital clone wheel, which came out in 2001, KORG had a very successful analog clone wheel, not using any digital emulations or digital algorithms, but with analog circuitry, but a fraction of the size and the weight of the real Hammond organ B3 that it was attempting to emulate. So those instruments were actually very popular with gigging musicians. I've had the opportunity to play on a couple of old analog CX3s and they sound really great, especially through a real rotary Hammond organ speaker. Okay, I found a little setting here that we can play. It's called the low manual jazz comp. So this is a mellow kind of groove that you could play on the lower manual of the Hammond organ. Sounds like this. Let's activate a little bit of chorus. This is the legendary C3 chorus 3 setting. These are assigned to the buttons over here. We'll talk more about that later. Okay, I just changed seats as well because the other one was far too low. It's important to get the right seat height and the right bench position when you're playing organ because you have your foot on the expression pedal. More about that later. Okay, about the controllers, I am using an expression pedal. It took me a little while to find the global setting for it, but once you've done that, just assign the expression pedal to the expression CC number and you get this kind of effect. And I hope you can hear this is a very authentic sounding Hammond B3. In case you didn't know, the B3 is the most popular model of Hammond organ produced from like the 50s to the late 70s, I think. Also, usually KORG have assigned these buttons to add the percussion. There you go, which is that lovely, pleasant pinging bell-like sound at the beginning of the note. Without. And it's also authentic in that it will mute the highest drawbar when you enable the percussion. Check my video all about how the drawbars work if you're curious to learn more about that. The left-hand button will normally switch on or off the chorus. We're not talking a typical analog chorus effect here. This is the chorus and vibrato section on the real Hammond organ. Adds a lot of richness and a little bit of brightness to the sound when you engage it. And then the pitch stick mod wheel, mod stick I suppose, is usually assigned to do the rotary simulation to ramp up between the high and the low sounds, and it sounds something like this. So you just push it up to toggle between them. And I quite like this rotary speaker emulation. It's a little bit squirrely perhaps on the high speed, but you can tune all the speeds and the depths and the intensity and the microphone position, so it's quite powerful. You could tweak it however you imagine a real Leslie to sound. But I like that you can hear the clear distinction between the bass rotor and the treble horn as they spin. Take one more listen. So that's definitely a step above what you get on most synthesizer workstations. All of them, in fact, I think I'll go as far as saying. We'll talk about that after this next performance. This one is called Niacin Walk Bass. I'm probably going to play something completely inappropriate, but I do like all the dirt and the grit. Listen carefully. You can just hear the sound of the Leslie spinning there in the background. And a really in-your-face sound that I'm really digging. So you've seen the title. In my opinion, I don't think there's many people that will contest this. This CX3 is the best Hammond organ emulation we have on a synthesizer workstation. The ones that come close I'll mention a little bit later in the video. But for a synthesizer workstation, this is pretty much the best you can get. It's not using samples as we've touched upon before. It's using a physical model, so you can tweak this to your heart's content to get the real Hammond organ sound you like. Because one thing to keep in mind is that all Hammond organs sound different, all Leslie speakers sound different, and the combination, the amplifiers that are being used are always different. And your idea of what is the perfect Hammond organ sound is probably different to mine and everybody else's. But what I like about this is that, as you're hearing perhaps as we flick through some of the presets here, you get a vastly different range of different tones. So I'm pretty confident you could dial this in to get whatever Hammond organ sound you prefer. This then is a bit of a classic. A lot of you have been asking me to perform this and tell you what the drawbar settings are. So let's take a look. A whiter shade of organ. If I press here, we can activate the drawbar page. We seem to have something like 8 or 6, 8, 8, 6, everything else up on the upper manual. Some lovely distortion overdrive effects. Take a listen. Percussion is enabled. On the left we have a sort of thinner kind of setting. Still sounds pretty fat though, so let's attempt to play something along the lines of whiter shade of pale. Here goes nothing. Some judicious use of the Leslie speaker speeds there. Hope you liked it. It was a bit ropey in the beginning, I know, but I kind of got into it as we went along. Okay, I've dialed up a patch called Smoke in Japan. I wonder what that could be referring to. You can hear all the noise, the grunge and the grime in the background there. Sounds wonderful, but I can dial that back with the expression pedal. So yeah, the other synthesizer workstations that come close, but not really, the closest I can think of is the Roland FA series, which has a rudimentary Hammond organ emulation built in that actually sounds very good, but Roland chose not to model all of the features of the Hammond organ. There's no chorus vibrato, for example, which is a very strange omission, because otherwise it does sound good. You certainly aren't getting the level of detail and all the parameter tweaking that we get on this particular synthesizer. So apart from the KRONOS, I don't think anything else comes close. The Modi X, for example, and the Montage have some very nice Hammond organ samples built in, but you can't manipulate the drawbars and the settings, the percussion, chorus and so on in the same way that you can do on here. So this definitely is the champion, as far as I can think of, in the synthesizer workstation category. Let me know in the comments if you have any other opinions. Now let's take a listen to this distorted organ patch, something for the rock organ lovers. Oh, if you're really into the sound of the Hammond organ then, and you want to step up above the authenticity and realism you get from keyboards like this, then the next step up to consider would be stage keyboards, things like the Nord Electro, Yamaha YC61, similar offerings by Hammond themselves. The advantage with those is that I think they sound even more realistic. This is a great sound engine, but it's based on technology from about 20 years ago, and a lot of things have happened since then. Perhaps this one has been tweaked, updated, I'm not sure. But some of the dedicated stage keyboards that have Hammond organ emulations built in, plus Fender Rhodes, Clavinet Wurlitzer, sound a little step above this in my opinion. But they're also keyboards that are focused on doing just that, whereas this one does pretty much everything you can possibly think of with all the sequencer, the effects and everything built in as well. But that's certainly an option, and the main advantage when you step up to a stage keyboard is you usually get physical controls for the organ section, things like real drawbars. You get knobs to enable, disable the chorus, change the settings and so on. Whereas this one, although you can do it here on the screen, it's actually working okay today. I sometimes find it hard to nail these with my fingertip. Certainly not something I'd want to be depending on adjusting in a real performance situation. It would be a little bit frantic, I think, using the touchscreen here. So that's the advantage when you step up to a stage keyboard. So this preset I have here is called LS, Gospel Funk. Not sure what's meant by LS, but let's play something gospel-y and funky. Maybe not so funky, but a nice gospel-y kind of sound anyway. If you want to take it even a step higher to get the feel of playing a real Hammond organ, then you'll need to start looking at some of the dedicated organ clones. I think Viscount, Krumar, Hammond make some of the very best ones. These will give you an even better sound that's modelled in the most minute detail, plus of course the real control panel layout, just like a real B3 with multiple sets of drawbars, all the controls just as they are on the real organ. Also, even more importantly, the dual manuals, one upper manual which you can use for doing solos and stuff, and a lower manual which you typically use for bass lines and comping. Anyway, I've found a patch here called the Green Onions organ, so you know what we've got to do. Let's give it a shot. Okay, I found another Booker T preset here, Time is Tight organ, that I'll approximate in just a second, but first I wanted to talk about some of the editing options that we have. This particular patch is just a single tone, but you can also split it, so you can have the lower manual with your left hand and the upper manual with your right hand. Press here to come into the drawbar settings page where you can adjust the two drawbar settings for the upper and the lower there. Pretty cool. You can also go in here, dive into the Leslie settings where there's lots of different things to play with. Two different Leslies are available. Custom or some original CX3 emulation. Custom sounds better to my ears, but you can tweak these as you like. Over here on the left we have various settings like leakage, which is some electrical interference in the Hammond organ, noise levels of the Leslie speaker, and so on. On this page you set up the keyboard split parameters. This is where we had the drawbars again. I'm just trying to find where we get the organ tweaking parameters. So I still haven't mastered all the editing pages here. I find it to be quite confusing, to be completely honest. Sometimes I stumble across them by accident. Here we have some pages where we can have more touch-friendly controls for some of the options that we can tweak. Here's where you can enable, disable the percussion controls, for example, and configure the chorus vibrato settings. Unfortunately, as you press the buttons that are assigned to these, you don't see them changing on the screen, which is a bit of a shame. We also have the possibility to adjust various levels here. For example, the key click levels. This is some EQ, and this is another way to manipulate the drawbars here on this page. So that was the tone adjust tab. Yes, I am finding it confusing to navigate between all the tabs and find the editing pages that I stumbled across earlier. It doesn't really help that I don't have very good vision and all of the text and fonts are in really tiny letters. And that's where the stage keyboards and Hammond organ clones really come into their own, because many of them don't even have screens. You just have all the controls laid out in front of you, and I actually much prefer that myself. So this is Time is Tight organ. That was I'm a Believer organ. So really enjoying playing the organ here. It's completely different to piano. You might look at it as having the same keyboard, exactly the same instrument. Not quite the case. The thing is with the organ, firstly, you have a very abrupt attack. Piano is a little bit softer also. It sustains as long as you want, which is completely different to a piano, of course. And also, the let-off, when you release the key, it's a very distinct sound as well. It's like a square wave coming on, then keeping on the top, and then cutting right off. That's the shape of the envelope. And you've got to keep that in mind as you're playing. Not only do you have to hit the notes very accurately and tight in the timing, you've got to also think about the release as you let off the sound or let off the keys, whatever chord or note you're playing. It's also super important to get that tight. So you've got to be very conscious of when you strike the keys and when you release them. And that's something I really enjoy. It's an extra dimension to the playing. The other thing that's different with the Hammond organ is that there's no sustain pedal. On the piano, you can get away with playing a little bit sloppily because you can just hold down the sustain pedal and then do a nice run like that, and all the notes will blurge together and sound quite nice. But on the organ, you can't do that if you're moving smoothly between chords, for example. You've got to sort of have this finger crawl technique, I think it's called, where you've got to very smoothly go between the chords. And then of course you have no velocity sensitive keys like you get on the piano. So the expression is done with your foot on the swell pedal. Which is a technique I'm still having to work on and try to master. So yeah, a completely different instrument really to the piano, even though on first glance it might look the same. Then of course a real Hammond organ has all the drawbar controls that you need to master, but that gives you the possibility to sculpt the sound in really interesting ways as you're performing. And of course you have the two manuals, so you can have two different sound setups going on at the same time to add even more variety and fun to your playing. So for all of those reasons, I'm really enjoying playing the organ at the moment. that was helpful and interesting if you are a lover of the Hammond organ sound, just like I am. If you want the best possible emulation of it in your synthesizer workstation or stage keyboard, well, now you've heard for yourself what the Nautilus and the KRONOS sound like with their CX3 sound engine. I'll see you again next time. Cheerio!